Welcome to the Old Fashioned Masonic Podcast, where we talk all things Freemasonry while drinking an old fashioned. I'm Brian.
And I'm Russ.
And in the middle, we have Most Worshipful Bob Talbott. And for here, we'll just refer to him as Bob. So in case you guys want to try to pick on us and light us up for anything silly. So welcome back to the podcast.
Glad to be here. Thanks for the invite.
You bet.
We were very excited about doing this piece for Memorial Day weekend. So we are going to talk today about a Medal of Honor winner, actually, and an Albert Pike Mason, which is also just icing on the cake.
Pretty cool.
Brother Erwin Russell Bleckley. But before we get into talking about the events and then the Mason, we want to go back into and talk about why the Bleckley name is important. So, my friend, you have the floor.
Yeah, thanks. Again, just labor of love. Glad to be here again, guys. Just want to say this is really just part of a larger paper that's going to be delivered to the Kansas Lodge of Research. I'm not there yet, but the pressures of deadline journalism have told me to speed it up and get something ready by Memorial Day, right? So here we go. So before we get into Erwin Bleckley, I just want to go back a step or a step and a half in the family or generation. So his dad, Elmer Bleckley, or known as E.E. Bleckley here in Wichita, talk a little bit about his background, right? So first of all, his family was from the Lehigh Valley County area in Pennsylvania. So all of his family. Elmer was one of 9 siblings. Don't have a lot of his history, didn't really focus on that in Pennsylvania, but at some point, probably due to his work with the Missouri and Pacific Railroad, he was a passenger agent, he migrated here to Wichita. The rest of his siblings, save for one, are all buried in Pennsylvania. He's got a brother, Charles, that's down in Woodward somewhere, and then Elmer, along with his family, are all buried here, except for Erwin, and we'll talk about that. Mm-hmm. So again, one of 9 siblings. When he moved to Wichita, he married Margaret Alice. They had 4 children, and as we probably all know, from our parents and grandparents, times were tough in the early 1900s, right? So of those 4 children, only 2 survived childhood. They had a daughter, Maeva, who died when she was 12. She was younger than Erwin. Erwin was the second child. And then their third child, George Little, died at 1.5 years. So out of the 4 siblings, only 2 survived really into adulthood, right? So it's at that time that we get a little picture of life in Wichita with Elmer. So first of all, very prominent businessman. As we said, he worked for Missouri and Pacific Railroad. Somewhere around 1912, a little sketchy on details, he started working for the Fourth National Bank. They've got records of him as a teller in the banker's registry. But whenever Erwin came on the scene and started to graduate high school and look at military, he was already vice president of the Fourth National Bank. So with that, he was a prominent man, ran with the elite in Masonry. Names like Bester G. Brown, who was not only master of Bester G. Brown, but he worked for the Lilly Company. Mm-hmm. Who's a Lilly Company? Look on the back of every one of the backdrops in the Wichita Scottish Rite. Yeah. Lilly Company. All over the country, Lilly presented those. George Pratt, we'll talk to him hopefully in another prequel, right? George Pratt was a lumberman in Wichita during its expansion days. An expansion of a city, if you're a lumberman, you are of the elite, right? Thomas G. Fitch, Colonel Thomas Fitch. Hopefully he'll be in a prequel as well. He was a member of Wichita 99 and eventually became one of the founding members of Albert Pike Lodge along with Elmer Bleckley. So probably enough of a teaser on a prequel for that, but we've got Elmer Bleckley. He was a member of Wichita 99, raised on in 1889. He served as a senior deacon, he served as a junior warden, and then in 1895 he became the founding senior warden of Albert Pike Lodge, along with George Pratt and Tom Fitch. So a little bit of background. Both of his sons were Masons, but we'll just tease that up and maybe get to that a little bit later.
That's fair. I do like the prequel tease.
Yep.
Yeah, I do like that at all.
We're going to be doing these until we're like 90.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
There you go.
So let's jump into Erwin Russell Bleckley. So Brother Bleckley was born on December 30th, 1894. As Bob alluded to, his dad was a vice president of the Fourth National Bank. Well, Erwin was actually a bank teller there. So he was a bank teller there, and then he decided that he wanted to serve his country and enlisted On June 6, 1917, as a private in the Kansas National Guard, and he went into the field artillery. Although he wanted to be a pilot, but the family did not want any of that noise. And there's lots of reasons. We're going to talk about one of the reasons why they wouldn't want him to be a pilot. So fast forward to June 5th of 1917, he was quickly commissioned as a second lieutenant. And a little over a month later, or about a month later, and on August 5th, his unit was called to service with the 35th Division of the National Guard.
Yeah, interesting note. His officer training and artillery training was in Camp Doniphan, which is part of Fort Sill, Oklahoma, as we know it now.
Lawton.
So you'll see a bit later, Lawton, there's a title, Lawton, his degree work. We'll talk about that in a little bit.
Yet another tease. So, so fast forward... Bleckley, so they're deployed now. The 35th is deployed, and now it's they need some volunteers for an observer school. And so he graduated and volunteered from observer school in 1918. He flew his first combat mission shortly after that on September 12th, 1918.
We'll walk through that a little bit as far as observation school for the artillery, but now we all of a sudden have planes, and so let's stick him up there and let's see what
an
he
interesting
sees.
Transition, right?
Yeah.
So he's already in artillery. He's used to calling for fire, right? Now he's got the ultimate viewpoint.
Yes.
And what a clever way to pull folks from the artillery. So he kind of almost got what he wanted. He's not really a pilot, but at the end of the day, he wants in the air. Planes were relatively new for combat at the time, right?
Absolutely.
They hadn't been in service long?
Yeah, about 10 years. Less than 10 years. Absolutely.
Yes. Think about that.
Yes.
Think about, it's not just like you're flying from Wichita to Kansas City. You're maneuvering planes and up and down, and so there's a lot going on. Now, there's some questions. So, like we talked about, he was promoted to second lieutenant after his initial training. So, there's some differing opinions. Some sources say he was promoted to first lieutenant about 5 days after he flew his first combat mission. So don't jump on us. If you say, well, I don't see anything like that. Well, we did. So, look it up, see what's right. Share in the comments. If we're all wet, give us a source. And we want to be as accurate as we can when we talk about pieces like this. So fast forward now, we're September 24th, 1918. The squadron was relocated. Okay, and so they're in a different area, and they're kind of doing what they do.
They're based out of Ramicourt, France. It's the 50th Aerodrome Squadron, by the way. They were revisited, and when you look at the time frame, it seems like a while, but from getting deployed in June to his first mission, early September, to where we're going to focus in on early October here, you've got 3 or 4 months that were going from an artillery guy getting trained as an observer. To your point, what is their job as an observer? He already knows what artillery looks like, how to call it. How do you find it? How do they do that? They draw fire. The whole reason going up to find them was you're going to get shot at. We'll then know where they're at. So you got to get in that mindset to start with, right? So
anybody that's been in the military and done any ground training, it really reminds me a lot of this. So when you're kind of volleying fire, there's a thing, you kind of have a mental count in your hand. In your head, you jump up, you take off, he's up, I'm up, he sees me and I'm down. I'm up, he sees me and he's down. So you're kind of drawing that fire. And they're essentially kind of doing that in these birds.
Yeah. So I'm not texting my girlfriend. I was just pulling something up real quick on my phone.
He's been caught doing that before?
That may be true. So just think about 1914 was when World War I started. So we're late into the game.
Right.
We have German aces flying around with 20, 40, 80 kills. They're professionals, and here young Americans are volunteering to get in a plane and go fly around to draw fire.
Really young Americans.
Young
Americans. So fast forward, a few weeks to October 6th. The 50th had already flown 13 additional missions, ultimately having 3 of their aircraft shot down. In what the Air Force was termed as the first combat airlift in history.
Airlift, absolutely, yeah. So let's back up a half a step, just about 60 seconds.
Let's, before you do that, up on the screen, you're going to see a photo we have of the 50th.
Awesome.
We had a conversation earlier, like which one is Bleckley? I don't know.
Yeah,
we're unsure. So if anybody looking at this can tell us where it is, we would love to know. But we wanted to share that photo. We thought it was important. So
and there are other Bleckley photos I think that are going to be linked in. Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
So October 6th. Let's just back up a couple days if we can. The focus on this talk is not about the Lost Battalion, but I think it's important, right?
Sure it is.
So Whittlesey, right? That's a name that's known for this battle, right? Whittlesey, he was commissioned a captain in the 308th, I believe it is. Yep, infantry regiment. And so how did we get to the situation where these guys were stuck or lost? So I think it's worth 60 seconds. So basically, on the evening of October 2nd, they were commissioned to go out, and their target was a German supply line. So they were in this Argonne forest. They were supposed to take the Charvaux ravine. I hope I'm saying that right. And beyond that was supposed to be the supply line. You had the 308th out front with Whittlesey. He had supporting units on his flanks that did not advance at the same cadence.
There was supposed to be an
what
offensive.
happened? What happened? He gets out there in the peninsula. Germans come behind him and cut them off, and they are trapped.
Yeah.
So this is the evening of October 2nd. Kind of keep that time frame as you go, as we're talking through the 6th and ultimately through the 8th before these guys get out.
Exactly right. I think that was a good kind of recap here. So now let's fast forward. So the early afternoon of the 6th. Bleckley is up flying again with Gettler, and we'll have a photo up here of Gettler. Bleckley took off. Gettler and Bleckley took off. They're trying to find this lost battalion that you referred to.
Absolutely. Yep.
So they went through. They did their first mission. They returned back to Remicourt, just kind of shot up with a lot of small arms. They also had some problems with the spark plugs
and engine.
Can you imagine this? And you just got spark plug issues. I mean, I don't even know if the new planes have spark plugs. I mean, is that how all engines have spark plugs?
Yeah, you've just hit the mechanic specialties of Albert Pike here. What?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know what a spark plug looks like, and I know a gapper in the old cars. So I know the pilots here are going to think we're as dumb as we are. So whatever. But they've been some problems with this DH4 for several days. So Harold Gettler, you'll see up on the screen, a dashing young man. He has a nice military mustache. It's inside the lines, nice clean cut, a good looking young soldier. So before all of this happened, Gettler and Bleckley, they were warned by their squadron commander, who was Captain Daniel Morris, that if you go back in here, this is going to be even more of a problem, and it's more dangerous because now they're expecting you to come back. You've already came back in here. So Bleckley famously was quoted, and you'll see across the screen, "We'll make the delivery or die in the attempt."
Yeah.
So I want you to think about this. We don't know if members of the Lost Battalion were Masons, but in our heart, we feel like they were all Masons, and he was flying to the relief. That's going to be our... So let's talk about this DH4 a little bit.
Absolutely. Yeah, before we jump into the plane, so, there's different sources that cite things differently. You noted that, right? So that incident with the commander, Morse, right?
Morse.
Supposedly they flew that first mission, they came back, and again, knowing what they were going to do, borrow a plane, fly even lower because there was misdrops and they couldn't find what they needed. Yeah. They knew they had to fly lower. And part of this may be part of the romantic lore and story versus fact. This is when Erwin Bleckley went to his tent, wrote out his cooperative will, left his will. On his way out, that's when the captain said, "I'm begging you not to do this," and then the famous quote, right?
Yeah. So, and I think those little pieces are sourced just enough. I think...
So let me just say, I think that's real
happened.
Common, though. I mean, those letters, too. It's like, hey, I'm going to...
Non-cooperative wills, absolutely.
And again, listen, I want to remind you, he enlisted. Mm-hmm. He joined. He could have sat there, wrote up the ranks with his dad at the bank, had a nice, cushy job. Nobody would have said a damn thing.
He was destined to be at that bank if he didn't do it.
He could have stayed in his tent.
And
went, no, I'm done. I'm done that day.
The captain gave me an order. I'm not going. But to me... This is just what helps make this more of a beautiful story. Yes. So, DH4.
Yeah. So, what were these guys flying, right? You got to get a mental picture of this. So, the DH4 was modeled after the British de Havilland 4. That was a well-known plane. It was combat tested. It had been proven out in the field. U.S. started making those. They were made out of 3 different plants. The only U.S. plane sent to battle in World War I was the DH4. right? So let's talk about this, its virtues and its challenges, and it's mostly challenges.
It kind of
right?
had a cool nickname. So they called the Bonanza. Have you ever heard the nickname for the Bonanza?
No.
The Doctor Killer.
Well,
No, seriously, because it was so fast. Seriously, it's referred to as the Doctor Killer.
and the DH4, the Flaming Coffin.
The Flaming Coffin.
Yeah.
So
Couple things on the Flaming Coffin. First of all, the de Havilland 4, right? This is a spruce wood frame, cloth-covered biplane model, right? The U.S., they took out the Rolls-Royce engine, which probably was a better engine, put in a Liberty 12-cylinder engine, right? Top speed, 128 miles per hour, not knots.
not knots.
128 miles per
And
hour.
I believe at no point in time were these guys ever flying 128 miles.
No, because
I
we're going to
think
talk
they're-
about the
yeah.
submission, and I agree with you because we're going to get into some of the details. So I agree.
This sounds like a bicycle with a little motor on front with some canvas
This is the
on
Wright
top.
brothers, and they're like,
Yes.
"Holy hell, you think this is going to work?"
Pretty close. So it did sport 30 caliber machine guns on the nose and also in the observation seat.
Yep.
So it was two-seater. Pilot was up front. You had an engine. You had a pilot. You had a fuel tank. We'll come back to that great design pretty quick.
Yeah.
And then you had the observation seat. So you had the dual machine guns, which is great, right? So the challenges for this thing, right? We just kind of mentally walked you through a diagram of the plane, right? So you had a pilot, a fuel tank, an observer. Verbal communication, nearly impossible when you're flying, besides the noise, right? So they had hand signals, and those weren't matured at the time, right? So the flying coffin, why was that? Well, a couple things. This fuel tank, what did we just say? Oh, cloth covered, not a lot of protection or shielding there, right? It was pressurized. They started experimenting with pressurized gas tanks. So not a lot of them blew up, but if hit by a bullet, wasn't a good thing.
Well, you know the enemy knew that.
Absolutely,
So
they knew
when I was in the military, when we would get our target packages, we would know what equipment they're using and say, "Oh, they're using this." Well, we know right where to hit that particular machine. Whether you're separating a turret, whether they've got a weaker tail rudder than others. So you get your target packages.
Yes.
And so they knew exactly where to go after these things.
Absolutely. So 2,000 pounds, you're only going 100 miles an hour, right? You did have a range of 400 miles. That was one of the positive things about it, right? You had these two separated crewmen in there that couldn't communicate to each other. And even if they didn't hit your fuel tank and couldn't find it, the other reason why it's called the flying coffin, there was a proclivity. If you didn't have anything but a smooth landing, the gas tank would come unhinged, slam forward, and kill the pilot, crushing him. Think about the layout of that didn't happen very often, but that was noticed as one of the fatal flaws of the DH4 with a center-mounted fuel tank.
Well, that's all reassuring for what we're about to talk about.
So let's make our second trip. We failed on the first couple. A lot of people had died. Let's go up again. Let me write my will.
Right.
Here we go.
Right. So I'm either going to get shot down or I'm going to land and blow up. Right.
There you go.
So when they go back on this mission, so the DH4 they were flying low, just kind of above treetops. They were cresting the hilltops. They kept descending in and out, as Russ mentioned. They were there to draw some fire. Let's think about this. Their job, if you've done it, their job was to suck out the enemy and expose their spots. Right. So again, they kept attempting to draw fire so they could call in for help and pop them up. So they were flying low in several attempts. They were trying to drop supplies. So this was a multifaceted mission. I'm going to draw fire, but I still got to get supplies to my guys.
Absolutely.
They were sitting there in this area of about 350 by 50 yards. Think about this.
Yeah.
This is 3.5 football fields by about a football field wide. That's not a lot when you're running in a plane.
With
And tree cover.
And with 554 servicemen in that area.
and
That's
I
who
didn't know
they
that number.
554.
And tree covered.
Yeah.
They can't see it. It's in the forest.
And again, just trying to paint a picture, we talked about treetop levels, swooping up and down, talked about a ravine. At times, they were taking fire from above.
Okay.
Right when you're in the ravine.
Yeah, so
All over,
your
up,
vantage
down, everywhere.
point, anytime, you always want to have that's why the planes were so, because you had the vantage, but when they're dipping into these valleys, all of a sudden, their targets that were here are now above them. They don't have all of the advanced weapon systems that you have now. So there was so much going on. So now they're in this firefight, they're weaving in, they're drawing fire, trying to drop supplies. Well, Gettler was struck in the head by a bullet. Now, there's differing opinions. Some say that, everything I've read, it says he was struck by a bullet and killed. I believe some storylines that he was still, trying to do a couple of things, but what everyone agrees upon when they found him, he was dead.
Right. He was dead.
He was dead. So when the plane crashes, Bleckley was thrown from the plane, severely injured, unconscious. He was rescued by by French soldiers, and rushed by automobile to the hospital where he died en route of internal injuries. I can't imagine that you didn't just, your insides weren't just totally blown up.
Yeah.
So Bleckley obviously was awarded a Medal of Honor. This was one of 4 Medal of Honors that were awarded to the air service members in World War I. Yeah. So Russ, chime in about that.
Gettler was the other. So they both, this situation, this episode, you get 2 of the 4. The other 2 were the highest aces of World War II for the Americans. Okay. So you have the first, his name was Frank Luke Jr.
Across the screen, Frank Luke Jr.
Yep. Okay. He had 18 kills. The majority of them were actually balloons with, I think, maybe 4 aircraft. Yeah. And so, always, just that little quip. He was also killed in action. So 3 of the 4 were killed in action. And the last but not least was Captain Edward Rickenbacker. And Rickenbacker, he was the leading ace for the Americans with 26 kills. So, and he survived, and you can read about him. That's a whole nother story in and of itself. So
I love it. So Bleckley posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor killed in action, just again near that lost battalion.
Yes, and Gettler was as well.
Yes, right.
But we're talking about Bleckley.
Yeah. So Bleckley took the round in the head. Gettler took the round in the head. Bleckley was the observer. They landed. He gets Gettler's dead. Bleckley's ejected, and the French came and got him to the hospital in hopes to save him, and unfortunately he passed him away. So
before we leave the battlefield, a couple of last things that I thought were interesting, right? So, and again, some of this, fact versus romantic story and embellishment, who knows? But definitely it's reported that Bleckley's diary and map showed out whenever he was rescued and tried to get him back to the hospital. It denoted they had found the lost battalion. He had evidence on him in his diary and the map, and definitely in a couple of days, I believe it was on October the 8th, out of the 554, I believe my numbers are 194 of the 554 came out unscathed. Not all were killed, a lot were wounded. Some were either missing in action, likely captured, they're thinking. Yeah. But at 554, 194, the only ones that came out healthy without a hit. So one last little tidbit on Wisley, right? Just we'll tee up.
So before we go there, one thing that we don't do a lot of prep before. So when you see, I didn't know about the 554, so I'm just excited to hear some of this stuff as you are listening. So it's kind of fun for us.
Absolutely, yeah. Learn a lot just since I've been here, right? So we talked about Major Whittlesley. He commanded the Lost Battalion. When he came out, he was decorated with the Medal of Honor as well. He was almost immediately promoted to lieutenant colonel. When he returned back to life, just a little bit of kind of war reality here, right? He struggled getting kind of reacclimated back to civilian life. Yeah. He was a very prominent, flourishing attorney with the White and Chase attorney firm there on Wall Street. But he was constantly harangued about his story. Not just by the press, but even by the government, by people wanting to laud what he did for that. So he was very troubled with that. So he was also one of the pallbearers for the original Tombs of the Unknown, when that was placed, not known. One of the original pallbearers, right? Yeah. But within a month, he would be dead. He went on a cruise that was bound to Cuba. He was having dinner that evening with the captain of the cruise liner. The captain thought he was in good spirits. Whittlesley turned in and was never seen again. Any hopes it was anything other than suicide were quickly blotted out. Letters back home with a will and letters to his family. Even wrote a letter to the captain of the ship saying, this is what to do with my luggage and my demise. So very sad side of war and what these people were dealing with.
Well, this released on Memorial Day. This is kind of a time that everyone, combat impacts people differently. Some people are able to compartmentalize that this is a job or times and whatnots. But, we have a lot of brothers, Masons, that are former military. And everyone struggles differently. And so I don't want to kind of take this a different direction. But if you got something going on, whether it's military or just life, especially as a Mason, you got lots of us to talk to, and we don't judge. If not, there's lots of help out there. And especially on Memorial Day, this is the time to really kind of take that extra moment and just think about that, because that really is one of the darkest sides of combat.
Humanity.
Right, because you're bringing all of that over. I'll go just a little bit here. The folks that send these young men and women to war that you have to do, I sure hope that they think about that a lot, because it's not just the folks that are left on the field. They're also bringing some of those back. So I digress. Sorry, went dark, but this is Memorial Day weekend. This is the time we should be talking about this.
Yeah, this wasn't planned, but appreciate we do talk about this. That's the whole thing. Got to talk through it. Yeah.
So let's come back into Wichita. Are we done with where you're at?
Yeah, absolutely. Go.
So Wichita, the Wichita Eagle Beacon on Friday, actually wasn't the Eagle Beacon, it was just a Wichita Beacon back then. On Friday, November 1st, 1918, the report of the death of Lieutenant Erwin Bleckley of Wichita, age 23, on October 6th, when his plane was shot down in France by a German machine gun fire. So the word, it took almost a month for it to hit. Think about that now. I mean, it's instant. I mean, you would know in seconds, right? Yeah. So that's strange.
Even during World War II, Korea, that was not an instant thing that families were notified.
Fair.
It took time.
So fast forward to kind of staying on the Wichita Beacon. Let's go all the way into 1932. Page 5, the American Legion Post was asked by the city commission to change the name of Harding Boulevard in Wichita. Now being built by the unemployed, essentially, I thought was easy.
Exactly.
Yeah. To rename that to Bleckley Drive in honor of Lieutenant Bleckley, who was shot down. And so Bleckley Street is still a street in Wichita. Absolutely. It hasn't been renamed, and I'm glad. So I just don't know that that's going to be renamed in our lifetime. He had a nice, solid, clean name, and I don't think anybody will want to switch that out.
For those of you local, it's just a couple of blocks east of Oliver. Wichita has never figured out the on-the-grid thing with roads, so it kind of bends and turns a little, but roughly just north of Harry, all the way up to Central, and then it continues again around 21st Street. So take a drive by there.
So what we always talk about on the Masonic, old-fashioned Masonic podcast, we like to know as much about the man as the Mason. So we gave a really good story on Bleckley the man. So let's talk about his Masonic timeline and how it was a little bit different. He's an Albert Pike Mason, but he did no degree work. Or did he do the first degree?
No degree work in Kansas appears to be the story. So I'm not sure what supporting evidence you'll have with this when it's done. But definitely his petition is very clear. His petition is all on file at Albert Pike. Yep. We've got photos and scans of that. So the dates, I believe you're going to see those on your screen. November 23rd, December 12th. Yep, and December 19th, he was raised a Master Mason.
Right.
Where?
Wasn't Fort Sill, but it was in Lawton, Oklahoma.
Lawton Lodge number 183.
Lawton Lodge number 183, courtesy work was at. So those who aren't Masons, let's just kind of bore you a little, or maybe some who are Masons and don't realize that. Courtesy work is done sometimes within the state. A lodge isn't able to do it for whatever reason, or somebody's here and they're off on business. And I would have to believe during World War I, World War II, Vietnam, there's probably a lot of courtesy work. I would even venture out to say, and I hope, that when folks were joining lodges around, or they were voted on and they were ready to go, but they were deployed, that a lot of degree work is probably done around the world.
Absolutely.
Courtesy work. And you know what? Folks, there's no excuse. If you want to be a Mason, there's no excuse, because we can do courtesy work all over the world.
Absolutely.
So we know people.
We know people.
We know people and know things. So
he petitioned in Wichita, and again, I'm not sure if that'll be a part of this, but his petition is top signers. His dad top lined him, which is a very cool legacy thing. Yeah, if you're a Mason, right? All of his degrees were done in Lawton, Oklahoma. Yep.
So we'll talk a little bit about the petition that we saw, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So some things that grabbed me. So dues at Albert Pike Lodge in 1891 were $12. Yep. $12. Today, 2023, that's $404 annually. I want you to think about that. I got lots of opinions on this. I'm not going to judge with my words. I'm judging with my tone.
I believe we've judged before in previous
$404 relatively.
Yes.
Okay? Now, initiation fees, that's on there as well. You had to pay half when the petition was received, and the other half before they got their first degree.
Yep.
Yeah.
Initiation fees in 1928, because we were looking at something different. So not to 1891, although I believe they were the same because they haven't changed a lot.
Exactly.
Right.
Yep.
So 1928, the initiation fees were $50. Today, that's $887. Boys, what are we doing? I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but if you're a Mason, you get it. If you're a Mason and you don't get it, I don't know why you don't get it. The value that we get, to me, as
We have
the
devalued
relationship,
Our brand.
100%.
we really have, and you'll see that on the next. There's a podcast coming up that have we opened the doors to Masonry too much? We're going to hit that just a little bit there, but guys, think about this. These gentlemen were heading off to war, and $404 a year wasn't crap to them, nor was the $887 to join up. I'm not proposing that's what it should be, but I'm proposing it needs to be different. So, sorry,
Just a little bit.
Bring me back.
Easy, Betty. Bring her back.
Anything else we want to talk about Mr. Bleckley?
Well, just a couple things. First of all, I want to give a shout out to Grand Lodge of Oklahoma, the assistant secretary there, Jay Walls. They did diligent work. He actually got a hold of past master James Oates, who's now the secretary. They were digging in the books. Unfortunately, there's no evidence in the minutes of the night he took his degrees. Mm-hmm. Probably not uncommon. Secretaries, your job's very important. Do what you can, but very chaotic time in the U.S. at that time. But one big shout out to them for all the help. It came up with nothing, but not because lack of their effort.
Yeah.
So thanks to those.
Another
guys.
interesting thing would be cool to know how many Masons were raised in Lawton around that time. Was it just so damn many because people were going to war?
Oh, I'm seeing a field trip. I know when Lawton Lodge meets, we need to make a trip, guys.
It's
going down. It's close.
We should shoot an episode from there.
That would be cool.
You know, we although it might seem crazy what we have going, this can go on the road real easy.
Yes.
I mean, real easy. It takes about a small duffel bag and we're out. So thank you for watching the Old Fashioned Masonic podcast. Bob, thank you for putting this together.
Appreciate
it was exactly what I'd hoped.
Cheers. Happy Memorial Day.